Welcome to the Bible Forum. Is there a global war coming? Hmm? Three major developments happening right now could lead to global war. Iran, Hong Kong, and North Korea. And the average American hasn't got a clue. In fact, if you showed most Americans a blank map of the world, they couldn't even pick out some of these places. Is that apathy or ignorance? Perhaps, but if a major war does erupt, none of our lives are ever going to be the same. Did you know that Israel and Iran are already shooting at one another? Israel's been striking Iranian military targets, admittedly inside Syria, for months. But now the rules of engagement have apparently changed. In an unprecedented move, Israel has expanded its attacks on Iranian targets with 2 bombing strikes on Iran-run bases in Iraq in the space of 10 days. The Israeli Air Force carried out the military strikes with F-35 jets, according to an Arabic language newspaper published in London. News of the attacks comes just a day after the U.S. and Israel tested a missile defense system which used targets similar to Iranian nuclear missiles. The reason this is being called an unprecedented move is because this is the very first time since 1981 that we have seen Israeli airstrikes inside Iraq. It is probably only a matter of time before Iran strikes back in a major way. And should Iran ultimately decide one of the best ways to strike back is to start hitting targets inside Israel, that could be a spark that sets off a major war in the Middle East. Meanwhile, in China, the political protests that have made global headlines in Hong Kong in recent weeks have greatly angered the Chinese government. They were probably hoping that the protesters would quickly subside and go home, but it hasn't happened. So now China is faced with a decision. If such protests were happening elsewhere in China, they would be brutally crushed. But Hong Kong is a special case. If the Chinese are too harsh with the protesters in Hong Kong, that could turn world opinion against them. But if they do nothing, that could encourage protests to start happening in other areas of the country. In the end, the Chinese will probably do what they always do, and that means crushing the opposition. Massive anti-Beijing protests, which have gripped Hong Kong over the past month, have become increasingly violent, as both an overwhelmed local police force and counter-protesters have hit back with force and are threatening to escalate to a larger geopolitical scale now after the White House has weighed in. With China fast losing patience, there are new reports of a significant buildup of Chinese security forces on Hong Kong's border. The White House is monitoring what a senior administration official called a congregation of Chinese forces on Hong Kong's border. Technically, Hong Kong is considered part of China, but it's always been allowed wide latitude to govern itself ever since being handed over to the Chinese. But now things could be about to change dramatically, and some are even using the word invade to describe what's about to go on. Just consider this tweet as an example. Someone by the name of Kyle Bass says the White House is monitoring a buildup of Chinese forces on Hong Kong's border. Here we go. The moment the PLA army marches from Shenzhen, it's over. China's army is going to invade Hong Kong. It's inevitable. With Chinese relations strained at the moment, any effort to use military troops to quell the Hong Kong demonstrations is going to push things over the edge. In fact, the Chinese have already been placing the blame for the protests in Hong Kong squarely on the U.S. government. China's position has been recently to declare the protesters going far beyond what's legal and peaceful amid clashes with police. And then there's North Korea. North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles early on Wednesday, according to the South Korean military, only days after it launched 2 other missiles intended to pressure South Korea and the United States to stop upcoming military drills. The latest launches were from the Hodo Peninsula on North Korea's east coast, the same area from where last week's were conducted. It said that South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said it was monitoring all of this behavior in case of additional launches. The North Koreans are greatly alarmed by the joint military drills that the U.S. and South Korea will soon be conducting. And whenever they get greatly upset about something, they seem to express their displeasure by firing off missiles. President Trump and Kim Jong-un have been talking, but things remain extremely tense, and it wouldn't take very much for a major conflict to erupt on the Korean peninsula. The chess pieces are slowly being moved into place, and the combatants are almost ready. Any number of things could ultimately spark World War III, and once it begins, it's going to be nearly impossible to stop. So what does any of these, have to do with the Bible? Well, you know, the Bible predicts a 1,000,000-man army invading Israel, coming across the Tigris-Euphrates rivers, which will dry up to allow that to happen. Today, China has over 620 million men, what they call fit for service, with just over 2 million under arms. The same with the U.S., although our population is much smaller, at about 350 million. Iran has 40 million men fit for service, with just under 900,000 under arms. The area is ripe, and if things begin to happen in that particular area of the world, Turkey will surely get involved. Saudi Arabia will be involved. Egypt will be involved. Russia will be involved. The European Union will be involved. The United States will be involved. It's very easy to see how all of this house of cards could come tumbling down very quickly and very easily. These are the kinds of things the Bible has talked about, written 2,000 years ago, explaining in detail how this world is going to end, how that millions and millions of Bible-believing Christians are going to be removed from this planet in a miraculous way, something the world scoffs at. They do not have a miraculous God, a God who is able to do this kind of thing. But the Bible is full of these kinds of stories. Men and women have experienced this, the Bible being a history book. When that happens, you can imagine the chaos that's going to ensue. Cars that don't have people in it, airplanes without pilots, without people. The world just suddenly bereft of people for no reason. It's gone. Clothes left behind. Don't know what happened. It would take months to get the order back. And when that's going on, there are people in this world who like to take advantage of that kind of chaos. And the world is now ripe. The armies on the east, the armies from the west, and the armies in the middle. Are you ready? Where would you go? What would you do? I would hope that you are a born-again child of God and you would miss it all. I'm planning on that. Are you?